I will not be supporting Harris, and obviously not supporting Trump. And the reason why is because I believe that aiding and abetting a genocide, that financially supporting a genocide, making genocide possible, should cost you at the very least your job. I believe that that is an easy moral stance for me to take, and in fact, I think it is incredibly dangerous for us, especially for us in marginalized populations, to say you can attempt to exterminate an entire indigenous population of color, and we will still vote for you. You don't have to do anything to earn our vote, you just have to not be the other person.
Sisters, brothers, siblings, happy 10-year anniversary of Seattle's Indigenous Peoples Day. When our movement won Indigenous Peoples Day in Seattle, it was the second, as Millie said, of these victories. And it was the first Indigenous Peoples Day in the US that was established as a clear rejection of Columbus Day and of the genocide against Indigenous peoples in the Americas. This is highly relevant because we are now witnessing another genocide in Gaza in real time, and we have to act in working class solidarity. There are important lessons from our victory in Seattle. It was not a victory that came from the Democratic Party. In fact, Indigenous leaders had reached out for many years to the supposedly progressive Democrats on the Seattle City Council, and not only did not find support, they were completely ignored. Winning Indigenous Peoples Day took getting the first socialist city council member elected in Seattle in more than 100 years. Working people, socialists, and I won our first city council election in 2013, and then in 2014, along with activists like Matt Remley, Millie Kennedy, and countless others, we won Indigenous Peoples Day. But the fight with the Democratic Party did not end there. Current mayor Bruce Harrell, who was a council member at that time, Harrell collaborated with the right wing in 2015, a year after we won Indigenous Peoples Day, and tried to undermine Indigenous Peoples Day by bringing back a backdoor proclamation praising the genocidal Christopher Columbus, the butcher and enslaver of Indigenous people. My office exposed Harrell in this. The Stranger newspaper wrote about it, and Bruce Harrell was very nearly defeated in the election that year. Unfortunately, he wasn't actually defeated. We also had to fight the Democrats to fund the annual Indigenous Peoples Day celebration, and then we had to fight to defend that funding. Now, Mayor Harrell and the All-Democrat City Council are presiding over the attacks against so much of what our movement won, including renters' rights, including the historic $15 an hour minimum wage that they are still attempting to undermine and which we still have to fight back against. They are now getting ready to pass a budget that includes massive cuts for basic social services for some of the most vulnerable community members, especially in communities of color and in the Indigenous community. Many people would like to give the benefit of the doubt to the Democratic Party to see it as a lesser evil compared to Republicans. Our movement's first-hand experience and my own personal experience on the Seattle City Council with 8 Democrats and with me as one socialist over this last decade completely rejects this idea, as does the whole history of the Democratic Party. This Democratic Party is now acting in partnership with the Israeli ruling class in carrying out a genocide. We cannot support a party of genocide. Hi, Ijeoma. Thank you for joining On Strike.
Hi, it's nice to see you.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Happy Indigenous People Day to you too.
Thank you. It's great to see you here. Can you tell me how you feel now at this 10th anniversary of Indigenous Peoples Day, and why is it important that this victory was won for you as a black writer, as a public figure on the left in Seattle?
I think that it is so important that we recognize that we have shared oppressors. As a black woman, as a Nigerian American, and a Nigerian American of indigenous Nigerian descent, recognizing that the same forces at play in my oppression are the same that were at play for the genocide of Native peoples and the continued oppression and erasure of Native peoples. And so this commemoration of this day here in Seattle not only was an incredible victory of brilliant organizing that Matt Remley and so many others, did and were a part of, it also is a testament to our continued existence and resistance. Every victory for BIPOC is a victory for all of us, even while we recognize how distinctly important this is for Native peoples here. These moments of joy are fleeting, these moments of celebration, these moments of remembering and honoring struggle are few and far between these days. And so I just love being able to be a part of community today.
And to your point about fleeting moments of joy, we're having this commemoration of this incredible victory in the midst of another genocide of Palestinian people at the hands of the Israeli state, but not without the full-fledged support of the Biden-Harris administration and of Democrats and Republicans both. How do you think we should look at in terms of the genocide of Palestinian people, the oppression against black and brown people, against the exploitation that working people face as a whole under capitalism? Do you think all of these issues are connected, and should we fight against the continued and systematic attempts to divide us and conquer us?
It is absolutely connected. In a country like the United States, literally built off of the blood of one exploited people, multiple exploited peoples, and the extermination of another, exploited people, it is so important to recognize that is only maintained through more blood. And the way in which you justify that is through story, right? Story of the relative worth of other peoples. And so these incredibly harmful, murderous stories about what Native lives are worth, about what Black lives are worth, about what Palestinian lives are worth, about what disabled lives are worth, about what workers are worth, justify this machine that harms us all. And so it's important that we tackle that. It's important that we recognize our shared humanity, that we recognize our shared struggle, and that we do a better job, honestly, of educating each other of how this works. The one thing that's been made really clear to me this last year as a Black woman is how much of a better job we have to do, those of us who do movement work, those of us who are educated about global colonialism and imperialism, of how dangerous this is for us, of how much these are the same oppressors, how much these systems will come back on us, how no one is safe if this is allowed to continue. And, outside leaving our general humanity alone, right? No one should be able to look at what's been happening and be okay with it. But if you are concerned with your safety and an argument is being made that your safety requires the oppression of other people, it is important to ask who benefits really from that argument, who's making that argument over and over again. And it's the same people who turn around and justify violence against us.
That's a very important point. And talking about the justification of the violence against Palestinian people, the genocide, and the forces that are making that possible and are perpetrating it are the same forces of capitalism and the systems of oppression that are also carrying out oppression of indigenous people here, and also the overall exploitation of tens of millions of working people in the United States. What are your thoughts about Barack Obama attempting to shame Black men for not supporting Kamala Harris, Black working class men for not supporting Kamala Harris?
I think it's disgusting. I really do. And I would say it's disappointing if it were unexpected, but it's not unexpected, right? This is what people who are invested in power do. This is how they justify their own war crimes and the continuation of these systems of power. It is really, really important that we recognize that there is nothing systematic in these existing systems that will save us or help us. Now, misogyny exists, and there are absolutely people who will not vote for Harris because they don't want to vote for Renee. I am not denying that. But there are a large portion of us who are not going to vote for someone who is currently sitting in office and having that real conversation, having a real conversation about policies and the incredibly anti-Black policies that the Biden-Harris administration has been putting forth. It's a conversation we need to be able to have if we want to have collective power. No matter what happens this election, we need to reckon with the reality of what people believe versus what they say. I don't believe saying anything that far off from what she's going to do. She's been very clear that she's the top cop. She's been very clear that she plans on deporting people, that she plans on continuing to support a genocide. We're making arguments for her that she didn't even ask us to make. And I find that that's where we need to really decolonize our minds. We need to really reach out to each other with love and recognize this actually is a symptom of harm of what these systems do to us, right? We are so miseducated in many ways, and we're so lied to in many ways, that we will be out here making arguments that make us less safe.
And last but not least, what do you tell people when they say who should we vote for in this election? First of all, do you agree with us in Voter Strike Back that the presidential election is in no way separate from having a position on genocide? In other words, what I mean is that if I'm against genocide, then it is untenable for me to then support the warmonger-in-chief of the Biden-Harris administration. And Harris has blood on her hands, just like Biden, as the vice president, as part of as a leader in the Democratic Party. So, what do you think about what working people should do in terms of both Trump and Harris being warmongers, being part of genocidal warmongering parties, and voting instead for an anti-war, pro-worker candidate like Jill Stein?
So I've been really clear that I personally will not tell people how to vote, but I do share what I will be doing, right? I will not be supporting Harris. I'm obviously not supporting Trump. And the reason why is because I believe that aiding and abetting a genocide, that financially supporting a genocide, making genocide possible, should cost you at the very least your job. I believe that that is an easy moral stance for me to take, and in fact I think it is incredibly dangerous for us, especially for us in marginalized populations, to say you can attempt to exterminate an entire indigenous population of color and we will still vote for you. You don't have to do anything to win our vote, you just have to not be the other person. When we send that message loud and clear, that's fine with us. Then what do we have? Where do we go from there? How can we possibly be able to do anything of the people who simply represent us when our red line is so far that it extends past genocide? That to me is so dangerous, and I really fear for the future of this country, the way in which people are willing to overlook genocide with their vote. And as someone with Palestinian friends and family, I want people to understand that the worst case scenario they fear is already here for them. There is nothing worse than genocide. There is no fear you can have over the next 4 years that is worse than genocide. So to say that you are voting a particular way to prevent the worst, what you're talking about is you're voting to prevent worse things. And you are making a value statement about your life versus the life of others. And I want people to be willing to sleep at night with the decisions that they make. But I'll say beyond that, start organizing them. No matter what happens with this election, part of the reason why we are where we are is because people only decide to pay attention at certain times. Because people decide that what happens overseas doesn't matter here. Because people decide that what happens outside of the election cycle doesn't matter the rest of the year. It matters here this time. And if we aren't challenging the system all the time, and then we decide that we're going to argue about this 3 months every 4 years, we're never going to make it. The truth is that the wheels are falling off of us. We are absolutely in a stage now. And we are going to learn how to recognize what oppressive forces look like, how to lean on each other outside of these systems, lean into each other, fight oppression wherever we see it, fight everyday fascism where we see it, instead of waiting for the big thing to announce itself with a sign outside of your door. And that's the only way we're going to get through this. But I really, really hope that people understand the real risk of letting our leaders know that we are okay with genocide. What that means for everyone who is afraid and making decisions out of fear right now, because I do think people are making decisions out of fear. So I don't want to demonize people, because right now people are literally being told, I've seen black people told that there will be bringing back lynching in the streets. When people are being told that this is going to bring back Jim Crow, that this is going to do all of these things, it's triggering that multi-generational trauma in people, and people are acting from a traumatized space. And I need us to stop and pause and realize that the way in which we have survived time and time again is by taking care of each other, by standing up for each other, and saying that this is not okay anywhere, no matter who it happens to.
And I know I said last question, but you brought up a very important point, Ijeoma. I was wondering if I could just quickly follow up on that, which is that there are genuinely motivated fears about the reactionary far-right agenda that Trump might be able to bring about, which poses specific threats for oppressed communities, the LGBTQ community, trans community members. But you brought up a very important point, which is that if that is indeed our fears, and we all share those fears, regardless of whether we are directly facing that type of oppression personally or not, I care about what's going to happen, and I want to fight against oppression. But you brought up an important point about strategy, which is, if the fears of what will happen to oppressed community members in the U.S. under a Trump regime are what's motivating people to vote for Harris, then is it a good strategy, actually? Is it an effective strategy to give a pass, a passing marks or passing grade to genocide, and then actually will we be able to prevent those oppressions from worsening?
Yeah, I just don't see it happening that way. Partially because what we're talking about right now, the fear that people have over Project 2025 is real. And it's also been put into motion years ago. Right, and this is not even the first iteration of this, right? We all remember Project for a New American Century, remember all of these things, right?
And the partnership of the Democrats and Republicans on all of these issues.
Right, absolutely. And so what I think it's really important to remember is that when I was screaming years ago, and so many of us were screaming years ago about what's happening in our education system, right? About what books are being pulled, about the way in which our schools are being made unsafe. This was during presidents of both mainstream political parties, right? We have to be fighting that all of the time. If people think that what we do in November will end or save us from what's been in motion for years, it won't. The only thing that will is us coming together collectively and deciding that we're going to actually look at it where it is and fight it every single day. And fight it in a way that respects what we can do as a people, instead of hoping that there will be some magical change in the system that's going to come save us.
Thanks so much, Ijeoma. I really appreciate it.
If you agree with us that building the strongest possible vote for Jill Stein is the most important priority for the anti-war movement and working people at present, please get active in the fight. We can't afford to let the momentum of Stein's presidential campaign end after November, but need to continue building towards an organizing conference in February to discuss next steps towards a new party for working people. Consider becoming a member of Workers Strike Back by signing up for a monthly donation on our website, workerstrikeback.org. Solidarity.